Welcome to Cracking Conflict, a 15-episode series on the Fearlessly Human podcast. I'm Kavita Khanna, a leadership and culture strategist, coming to you from Aotearoa, New Zealand.
And I'm Dr. Vicki Dalton, a clinical and forensic psychologist tuning in from Indianapolis in the US of A. Welcome back, everybody, to our podcast on cracking conflict. Today, in episode 10, we're going to do a deeper dive into respectful disagreement. We all actually have a choice in conflict. Do we shut down? Do we blow up? Or can we speak up, but with skill? Today's conversation will explore the respectful disagreement and what it really looks like and why it is absolutely essential for high trust and high performing teams. I kind of want to start with an interesting take on some of this, Kavita, some of the stuff that you've spoken before about how it can actually be a positive thing, but it's really kind of hard for us to get to that place. So I want to pose a question. Can disagreement actually potentially deepen trust? What are your thoughts on that?
This is a really deep question because conventional wisdom suggests that harmony builds trust, trying to find common ground builds trust. However, we know this from experience that unless disagreements are surfaced, you cannot work through them. So this is where we've been talking in the past episodes about moving into problem solving. Disagreements are natural, they're normal. Put two people together, they will disagree on something. You cannot be constantly aligned. But unless you're able to surface it, unless you feel you have the agency to say what you're thinking, you cannot move past the initial harmony into problem solving. And when teams are put together, one of the things to remember is that these are different people. And it doesn't matter if they share common background. It doesn't matter if they have a common purpose even. The important thing is that in order to build trust, they all need to feel safe enough to say what they disagree about. Now, that doesn't mean that you just take that as a blank check to disrespect. So that is why today's episode is all about respectful disagreement. And I'll take a quick digression. There is a model by Patrick Lencioni called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it's all about high-performing team. And the base, the foundation of that model is about trust. And there he talks about respectful disagreement, being able to surface differences. And there's a huge role that leaders have to play, or people who set teams up have to play to create that condition, to create that permission. So what I do wonder, though, it comes naturally to me to disagree openly, and that's partly confidence, partly experience. But what stops people from speaking up, even if they strongly disagree?
There's really lots of things that I think it can be. Certainly the culture, certainly the person's history, maybe the power dynamics in the room. And to your point, the person who's sort of in charge or running the conversation, whether that's an alliance manager, whether it's in the business world, whether it's a mediator, whether it's HR, that you need to set the stage for this is a forum to respectfully disagree and to listen, and setting that stage and can kind of pull it out. I have found when there's major power differences, that it really does need to be spelled out. Like, let's kind of, tell me your thoughts that don't align with me, that don't fit my thinking. That'll open it up. But a lot of folks are afraid of consequences, ripple effects, of being disliked. and thinking it might influence them. There's sort of this human instinct to want to be liked and to get along, which it's interesting that you apparently have worked past that. You're pretty good at speaking up and disagreeing with people. And quite frankly, it happens in my world, in my therapeutic world all the time. People say they want a therapist that's direct like I am, but what they often mean is they want me to directly agree with how they're thinking and feeling. And that's not where we discover the problems and work through the change. And to your point earlier, it gets attached if you don't address it. It gets attached to other things. And I guess there's other things like culture could really be a difference. I was fairly recently, I was participating in something called a JAVI, which is a Joint Alliance Value Initiative program. It's an international program where we get together and do a lot of great teaching and problem solving on things in the alliance world. But this particular class I was with, part of my class was a contingent population that was in the Asia Pacific area. And the culture there is different, in particular with this one company. And we were working with lawyers. The call was talking about how to utilize a lawyer in your business and on your team and when to reach out to them. And I didn't even necessarily think it was a joke. I was thinking it was like a icebreaker. I'm like, here in the US, we kind of give lawyers a hard time. Nobody likes the lawyers. We sort of pick on them, right? We don't really like them, but you should get to know some. And I had made the joke asking, like, so what's it like? This particular company was in China. I'm like, what's it like in China? Do you guys like your lawyers? Do you not like, kind of making that joke? And I got like silence. I got like nothing. And then in the chat, somebody popped up and like, there is a lawyer on this call. We are never going to speak about this. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I did, like there's a cultural thing that I completely, stuck my foot in my mouth. And so being aware of the cultural differences and again, trying to create it. What I also learned from that was that disagreement is still okay. You just do it one-on-one. You don't do it in a public forum, which I feel like that's important. But when we're trying to create a team, that's a little harder.
Yeah. Is there something around gender as well? Do men tend to disagree differently from women?
There's a couple of things that come up pretty frequently, and I guess these are gross sort of generalizations, of course. Women, by definition, in their communication and problem solving and their style, it tends to be more collaborative, often asking specifically for opinions, maybe not specifically for disagreement, but asking for opinions. And men tend to be sort of more direct and sort of definitive in it. But probably some of the things that come up the most are the confusing social signals that we are both doing it on here really consistently. We're nodding along when the other person, and that is seen by many, typically more men, as alignment, when in fact women are often nodding to, I'm aligned that I'm listening to you. I'm hearing where you're going. And it's not unusual for me to be nodding and like, okay, I totally disagree though. And then I'll go off and there's like this look of like, what, you were just nodding along. And so some of those subtle kind of differences that seem to be, at least here in the US, sort of gender-based things to pay attention to. Those are all things that can come across, differently. And again, the goal is to be respectful. And when you're building teams and relationships, there are three things that are imperative to building a healthy relationship. Communication, because without it, you can't build or repair, trust, and respect.
The other question is, how do you create these conditions? How do you make sure that disagreement is respectful? And I know you and I were talking about ground rules, but that may not be practical every time a team meets. Or do you think that's the way to go?
I think it's good to sort of set the stage. You may have to go back and kind of remind folks, like, hey, this is a really great discussion. Let's not lose it in our delivery. Let's keep it going. So maybe a reminder. But I think you bring up also the point is, how do we manage ourselves? How do we manage ourselves to feel more comfortable in sitting in that disagreement, to let it emerge and really come to the surface? And there are ways that we can do that. Part of it sort of being conscious and aware, especially, if we're calling this like a brainstorming meeting, we're coming in here to pick something apart, you're in the right mindset. But many people find it's uncomfortable when someone is disagreeing with them. And so becoming aware of certain things, like if it's your idea that somebody's disagreeing with, not taking it personal, staying in that stay curious mode in your mind and like, okay, tell me more, but make sure you're really listening to how, they're communicating about it. And a part that you brought up earlier that seems really important is we've got to really be able to kind of suss out what is it we're disagreeing about? And that many times when I'm dealing with people that feel like they're in fairly intensive conflict, I'm almost always able to find some middle ground in part of what they're saying. They are actually aligned in large percentages of it. And so when we
Yeah,
can break it down. Mhm.
and it's a technique I use often when you don't seem to be going anywhere or are in an argument or conflict that seems to be on the surface unresolvable. But when you sit down to it, it's just 3% that you don't agree with. And once you shift the focus to the fact that it is a small proportion and invite problem solving, that small proportion, often it's really easy to get to a stage where people say, okay, I can live with it. And I think
That makes
it's that
sense.
perspective building,
Mhm.
isn't it?
Yeah, and the some of the techniques that I've learned to use, is being able to repeat back because you're trying to be a really good listener too. That helps people feeling heard, even though they know you're going to disagree with part of it, but you're saying like, I really like what you said about this piece and this piece. I can totally get on board with that. That feels like we're aligned. When you shifted over to this part, you kind of lost me. And let me tell you why I feel like we're on a different page. Now
Yeah,
we're
and I
having a
think
conversation. Mhm.
that is really important, is to acknowledge what the other person said and
Mhm.
find that common ground, because that in itself can create that trust building, because then the other person hears you have listened to their point of view.
Listen, yeah, yeah, but we want to feel heard, and that's the how you respectfully push back.
Yeah,
When someone brings up like something that you're thinking, what the heck are you saying?
yeah,
You got to school your facial features so that you're not looking at them like incredulity or ridiculous or being dismissive. You need to stay in a place of respectful listening. So then you can respectfully share, when I heard you say this is what I started to think about. This is where I kind of feel like we diverge. Here's my perspective. How is it different from yours? So I want them to hear my perspective, and I'm signaling that I want them to tell me what is different. Like we're going
mhm,
to disagree. And so I feel like that's an important piece when you've heard me talk about that amygdala hijack on how to keep your brain still grounded in the conversation is, signaling to them, I'm going to repeat back what I've heard you say, but I want you to hear what I'm saying. You're making it back into the here and now. And that's a way,
correct.
but respectfully pushing back, like, I only agree with this part or I only disagree with this part. It's an acknowledgement of the worthiness of the other person.
Correct. And I think if it doesn't just need to be the leader, anyone in the team can follow this. So this is not a leadership skill per se.
Mm-mm,
It's just a
mm-mm,
relationship skill. If you're a human being and you want
mm-hmm.
to have good relationships, this is something you can follow as and practice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
disagreement doesn't have to end a relationship. It can actually deepen one. And um, that's possibly where we need to stop today and really look forward to the next time where we move from disagreement to co-creation with a conversation on collaborative problem solving. We've touched upon it slightly today, but
Mm-hmm.
we'll really deep dive into it in the next episode.